Okay, so I know I showed you this slide, but you know, one of the important things with what we need to know for the test is, you know, you need to know structure and function of prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Give me an example, everybody should yell one out, of a eukaryote. Of a eukaryote. Animals. What else? Plants. Humans, did you say? Yeah, so animals, yeah. Protista, single-celled eukaryotes, and fungus. That's them. Okay, so prokaryotes, what are they? Bacteria, period. Bacteria, that's it. Now, there happens to be two different kingdoms of bacteria. We won't worry about that now, but we're talking about bacteria. And so anyway, please make sure you know this, you went over this, and also that Cells Alive will make you do this really well. Okay, it all has, like, you know, diagrams, and they're interactive. You could click on the organelles, so I highly recommend that. Okay, so the new topic is multicellular organization. Now, remember, I went very quick. I didn't really lecture on all the organelles. We're going to hear advertisements next time, so that's why I was a little concerned and thought, all right, I'll give you the Cells Alive extra credit, okay? So please make sure you know them. You also need to know them for next class because we have our vocab quiz, right? Okay? Plus, you guys will share your advertisements. And the vocab is right there listed on that learning plan. There's not another word on there. If I missed one on the book, I did it on purpose because it won't be on the quiz and you don't need to know it. Okay? Okay, so back to prokaryotes, because those are the simplest cells and they're all unicellular. However, I did say prokaryotes, didn't I? Okay. However, they do live in colonies, some of them. And we start to see some specialization even amongst them. So this is a bacteria chain, and you can see the cell that looks different than the other cells. Do you guys see this? So this cell is actually doing nitrification. It's changing nitrogen from the soil into a nitrogen, helping with a reaction that these organisms want to utilize. And we'll talk more about that later. But the point is here is that you have some specialization. You have some division of labor, right? That cell's going to do that. So in the way that when they're living together, they can cooperate to some level. Either way, it increases their fitness. They survive better in a group, okay? So that's the basics of where multicellular organisms came from. But that last little point was, if one broke away, it would be fine. It'd probably go on to reproduce and make its own colony if possible. One of my favorites is Volvox, and we'll get to see this. So after the Christmas break, I'm not sure when I get them, normally February, maybe even March, we'll get a whole bunch of Protista. And we do it to learn about Protista, but we also do it as an evolution activity, seeing how different they are from each other. And we'll get to see Volvox. And Volvox is spinning. You can find videos online really easy. It's awesome. But each of those little things are an individual cell. And they have flagella, but they work together, kind of like, you know, rowing one of those big, all the oars rowing together on like a big Viking ship or something. So again, they work together. They also will bud off new colonies. At first, they're inside, which I think is kind of funky, but somehow they get out, I guess. And so there is, again, special adaptations. Their cells, their individual cells, look like a free-swimming Protista, and they're probably related, even though this one still has the free, you know, individual cell lifestyle compared to the Volvox. And that's a picture of Volvox. Okay, so then the next step would be true multicellular organisms like us and plants. And then we get to cells making tissues, tissues making organs, and then groups of organisms groups of organs doing what? Making a whole system. So, for example, with different cell types, like gland cells, they specialize in making certain types of chemicals. Nerve cells are efficient in conducting electrical signals, which is potassium ions and chloride ions, is the ions that move through our nerves. Muscle cells specialize for movement and contracting. And then also there's the epidermis layer, which is a protective layer like skin layer. You also have epidermis tissue in your inside tube, too. So one of the simplest multicellular organisms is Hydra. And that is a stinging thing like sea anemones and coral. The simplest animals are sponges. But this is a little bit more advanced, and they're from the echinoderms. We'll talk about them later. But you can just barely see this with your unaided eye when it's an adult like that. And then you can see we have the organization. You have different cell types depending on where they're at and what their function is depending on where they're at. And I hope so far in Cell Theory Lab you have been noticing when you look at a certain cell, a different tissue, you see different cells in there. You see different shapes because of cell specialization. If you haven't been noticing that, then look more carefully at your slides today. See, we have stinging cells, nerve cells, we have cells with flagella, muscle cells. So here we have muscle cells. Those are striated. Muscle cells are perfect for contracting. Red blood cells, again, remember, concave to increase surface area. Yeah, it seems subtle, but that's increasing it. And if you have billions of those things, you're increasing the amount of surface area. Okay, so like we said, tissues make up organs, organs make up systems. And then here's the circulatory system. Here's an organ in the circulatory system, the heart. And you can see the different tissues, even fatty tissues, muscle fibers. And again, these cells get so specialized, they don't look like our cell models anymore. Actually, if you think about it, the cell models are generalized cells to show you what basically are found in cells. So as you saw on your microscopes, they weren't perfect little square plant cells, you know, what you maybe envisioned, and like our cell over here. The animal cells weren't these perfect spheres like you might have envisioned from our models. There's a great picture in the AP book if you guys want to check out, and that's not even, that cell model picture doesn't even exist, but they wanted to show everything. So they got cilia coming off one side, they got flagella coming off the other side, so they integrated every possible organelle, which doesn't happen in reality to one cell because they're so specialized. Okay, so what's the problems with being with being a multicellular organism, especially a larger one, is making sure all your cells can get everything they need in and out. So the simplest ones, like sponges, but even Hydra, are in water, so that helps with transport. They're not out in air where they can dry out and not exchange things as easily. If you think about it, when you guys breathe, you're supposed to be breathing through your nose. It's dampening the air. Do you guys remember this when we talked about the lungs? The oxygen is getting dissolved in water droplets. That then diffusion is happening in those little alveoli sacs. It's a bunch of surface area. So, you know, the history of breathing comes from water. And way back when, and the fish still obviously do it, and the Hydra and the sponges. Okay, but my point here is you have to come up with a whole system to get things in and out of cells if the cells are deep and away from the environment that they need to get things from or release things to. Does that make some sense, you guys? Because that's the bigger topic of understanding here with multicellular organisms. Let me see here. Okay, so most cells are not in the direct contact with the outside environment. So we need specialized systems that require handling deliveries between the environment and the cells. And we have it with our digestive system, right? We have it with our circulatory system. We have it with our respiratory system. All those systems, right, are about getting things in and out to every single little cell. Okay, so cells are considered
Matter in the biosphere is characterized by increasing levels of organization and complexity. Each higher level of order requires a greater input of free energy for its maintenance than the level below it. Starting at the top organizational level, the biosphere is the part of Earth that contains life. An ecosystem is a region within the biosphere, such as the Chesapeake Bay. A community would include all organisms in the Chesapeake Bay ecosystem. A population would include all organisms of one species, such as striped bass within the community.
You could see we're mixing in ecology to get all the way to the biggest level. And what was the biggest level again? Biosphere. Good. And bio means?
Using the striped bass as an example, each organism is made up of organ systems, such as the circulatory system. These systems are composed of organs, such as the heart. Organs are composed of tissue, such as muscle. Cells, such as blood cells, are composed of organelles, including mitochondria, which are built with macromolecules like hemoglobin. Macromolecules are built from molecules, which are combinations of atoms. Atoms contain subatomic particles, including protons, which in turn are formed from elementary particles, such as quarks. When would you draw a line to distinguish between life and non-life?
Okay, so when you look at that paramecium, can you guys identify any of the structures? Look up here, because when, this is not a model. This is a picture. And it's pretty confusing, isn't it? There's a lot of junk packed into there. Think back with diffusion and osmosis. Remember I was telling you? Water's going to move into that guy. So he has to pump it out. This is actually one of those spiral vacuoles right there. But this looks like, it's kind of hard, huh? I almost wanted to say that was the nucleus at first, but it kind of looks like a vacuole, and it looks very close to that one. So maybe this is the nucleus, and that's a vacuole. And we can't see anything, but we can see all this that kind of seems interconnected. What do you guys think that is? Maybe cytoskeleton. What else could it be? That's a little bit thicker of a structure. The ER, Golgi apparatus, right? All that. So that's your protista, and it is definitely a eukaryote. And remember, you've got to know the functions for each of these things, what they do. So for example, the nucleus, what's the nucleus do? Stores and protects. Okay, so see if you can do this quickly.